Welcome back to The Wedding Buzz. It's your host, Sydney, and today I'm so excited to introduce my guest, Janderyn. She's the owner of Earth and Sugar, which is a wonderful cake design studio located here in South Florida. Earth and Sugar has been featured in hundreds of magazines, blogs, and featured in places such as Vogue, Martha Stewart, People Magazine, and so many more. As a wedding planner, I can tell you her company is very well known in the area. Earth and Sugar is simply the best of the best, and I've had the privilege of trying their cakes, and they did not disappoint. So let's dive into the details. I'll let her explain more. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to dive in and to meet you because I've worked with your company and I've had your cakes at weddings, but I haven't actually gotten to meet you.
I get that a lot these days.
Yeah, well, you have like a well-oiled machine. Like you have a great business. It's not like, a tiny little thing anymore. Like you've really grown. It's fantastic. So I'd love to start at the beginning and hear more about you and tell me about yourself. How did you get started in this?
I've worked on this speech probably for like the last 14 years. We've been around 15 years next month, and I'm always trying to find the shortest explanation of how I got into baking, because everybody's like, "Well, did you go to pastry school?" I'm like, "No, I took political science." So my career,
I feel like nobody ends up in the career that they studied. Like,
no, I was never really like a creative person at all. I was just like really organized, and then I got into politics, and I started just tinkering with like what to do. So when I had my first baby, she was really sick, and I couldn't work in that field anymore because it took my time away, and that's a 24-hour-a-day field. And it's odd because I still ended up in the same place. Like when you start a small business, you're always like, I'm just going to start something that's creative, that fulfills me. And baking was always like a really natural thing for me because I used to do it with my Nana, which was my nanny. But I had such good experiences and memories from that. So I figured if I did something I loved, it would be fun. And I think at the beginning, we all want to say, let's do something that just, brings in some income. I'll keep it small and bespoke. And while that works for some companies, at some point you realize like you're starting a family. You can't do every single thing all on your own. Mm-hmm. It's equally as taxing. And the bigger you get, you're still having the same issues, they're just more magnified. So I started baking from my house, and while I was walking around actually in the Boca Mall doing stroller strides, which is like a mommy and me workout class, I was like, I need to sell some stuff to someone else than just like taking 12 cupcakes to a house. There's no money in that. Really, there's like zero money in that. But I was loving what I was doing, and my husband, who's a banker, was like, well, why don't you try doing things at volume? And I'm like, what does that mean? So he was explaining it to me, and what I ended up doing was just using my expertise in like sales and marketing and all that stuff. And I went to like Nordstrom, and they started carrying our cupcakes in their bee cafes. And then I started doing it at Bloomingdale's. And so like that was kind of the start of doing things at volume. Ultimately, we removed that completely from like our line of business because we're not a machine. And so it's very difficult to keep doing that at the cost of like, a machine doing it for you. Yeah. So I kind of just reinvented the wheel a few times and ultimately started doing wedding cakes. And I took a year where I started meeting wedding planners and people that were like growing up in the industry with me, like really big companies now. And they were like, let's do a photo shoot. And I'm like, what is that? And they were like, well, just make like a fake wedding. And I'm like, oh my God, on the beach or at a waterfall, all the beautiful pictures that people see, but they're so exhausting and half of them are unrealistic. But the first photo shoot I didn't even know how to stack a cake. And so I literally took it in like a cake pan and just put one tier on top of the other on a farm. And that one got featured in Southern weddings. And that same cake till this day is just like a bomb went off. And so I did 40 photo shoots in a year, and all of them ended up getting featured, obviously thanks to these photographers and everyone else who played a part. But that really is what scaled us out of like just doing small desserts and things like that. Amazing, though. So that's the short version.
That's the short version. That's amazing, though, that it started. I feel like I hear a lot of people in this business being like, well, I had kids and I wanted to be a mom, but I wanted to work, or like I was trying to do something. And then like their passion project turned into a full-time career. And that's amazing, though. Yeah. Especially, just trying to go to the mall and be like, hey, you want my cupcakes? And now like, from the outsider, like you have built this like amazing brand.
Thank you.
And it's not some random cake that you just stacked on top of each other.
No.
They are beautiful and well structured.
Yes, it is a process now. We definitely have so many different like areas. We have logistics, operations, we have client management, we have baking and pastry, design, and drivers and things like that. I still have my hand in every single pot in the business. It's just very different. Like you go through changes, especially after COVID, reinventing the wheel again, and we started doing like collaborations with like Stony Clover and Love Shack Fancy and like all this different stuff that really taught me to get outside of the box that I thought I needed to be in. And every year when we have a different amount of sales volume, we have to hit the ground running and do something different again. And that's just kind of like, it's reinventing yourself, which is really hard when you're a business owner and you build something and then like you're coasting. And then the one thing they tell you is like for growth or the next level of growth is you have to get uncomfortable. And of course that for me is very difficult because I have a super type A personality. But people in the industry that I call friends now are really the people who like push me out of that comfort zone. So it's been kind of nice. I've definitely made a lot of good relationships that have built me up.
I feel like that is so true. Like if you're uncomfortable, you're doing something right. Like if you're pushing yourself, you're doing something right. So I know you have a studio in West Palm Beach, right?
Yeah.
Off Dixie. And that's a location that people can actually physically come into and And do they have to make an appointment or can anyone just walk in?
So when we originally opened that store, that was probably my fourth kitchen because I started in commissaries. I mean, I could, go through so many of the horror stories.
What year did you start?
2009.
2009. So it's been a minute.
Yeah, it's been a minute. I mean, I used to
more than a minute.
Be at home with a baby and then pack all my baking equipment and supplies and go to like a commissary kitchen that was used for like feeding the homeless and would bake from like 11 to 4 a.m., come back, sleep 3 hours, be a mom, and do the same thing all over again. I just kind of work on my brand in between during the day. And I did that for a really long time. And then the next part was like networkers late at night or going to tastings in people's houses, like from here to Miami at any hour of the day. I mean, so to say I've put in a lot of sacrifice would be an understatement. And even till now, I mean, with being an entrepreneur, I think, when I go on social media, I always tell people like you see one side of a very short clip that people put up there, but the collateral damage that gets created when you're doing something that's working is usually your family. Just, it takes a while to see that, but it is very taxing. While you have a lot of flexibility, you also have an incredible amount of sacrifice that really doesn't ever go away no matter how many employees you have, especially with something that's like design specific and very branded. Mm-hmm. I think that when you're building something, you have to be really selective, but it's definitely been a minute.
Yeah. And it's true. I mean, owning your own business, it's funny because right before you got here, the guys that work here at the studio were like, oh, you are your own boss. Like, that's awesome. And I'm like, it is awesome. But, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. But, I was saying like, I have my husband who is very helpful. And, when I do wedding expos and stuff, like he's taking his time on his weekends to help me set up the tent and do this and do that. And, he's been to weddings before, lugging stuff. And
all hands on deck.
My dad has been to an expo before to help me. So it definitely is, the whole family is
a part of that community.
A part of it. It's definitely a sacrifice, but, to me, it's worth it. Yeah. I'm assuming to you, it's worth it too.
For me, it's worth it. I always have like moments where I'm like, this is not worth it. I don't want to do this anymore. Yeah. And I'm so tired. And like I said, you just have people in your life, whether it be family or friends, and then just people in the community that are like, get you out of that slump because you're going to go through so many different growth periods. And while you have a consistent brand, you do have to reinvent it from time to time, and that's what keeps you going. So while, having a bespoke bakery was okay to think about it, you can't be everything to everyone all at once for the rest of your life. That's not something that's feasible. And, at some point that comes down to numbers. And so you have to learn how to really grow a business. Yeah.
So walk me through a little bit. So you started in 2009. Mm-hmm. At what point did you get this location in West Palm?
So the one that we built out was 2016, I think. And that one was the first time no bank would finance us. They're like, this is too expensive. And for what you do, that's crazy. So my dad, bless his heart, was the one who actually financed that project. And it was a kitchen, in hindsight 2020, when I didn't know how to do any of this, and you sort of learn as you go, but I never planned for growth. So like when we built that kitchen out, I outgrew it in year 2, and we've been there 7 years. So you get really creative in what you can do. And we do a lot of volume, but we do it with a very small amount of people. And the reason for that is because along the lines, I've had so many employees, and I've learned that you could have like 30 wrong employees, or you could have, 15 to 20 really curated ones. And sometimes that's better. And you could see it in the numbers, but also just in the production. Like we have a lot of things that have to be done correctly. And our dishwasher is no less important than our actual decorator that makes the beautiful design on the outside. And I drive that message because everyone has a hand in that particular product, down from a cupcake to like a 9-tier cake. It's all the same to me because they're having to play a part in someone's day. And so that's a message that I continue to drive till this day. And that is a very hard message to put along to everyone, but it's really important so that there's no feeling of seniority. Obviously we have management and stuff like that, but we want everyone to work together and investing in that product.
Yeah, no, that's very important. I mean, having a team, even like for me on wedding day, my team is all the other vendors, and that's like I see them as part of my team, and like trying to get everyone to work together because it makes or breaks the day. And I'm sure that it makes or breaks the whole process for you if your decorators don't get along with your dishwashers and all of that. Like, at the end result isn't going to happen
for sure
as well as like bringing everyone together. So I'm sure that you have to be like a really good leader and bringing everybody together. So you've been at this location since 2016, and you've mentioned cupcakes and cakes. So you do, I'll let you, what do you do?
So when we built out this location, I was still doing everything by appointment only. And that worked. I finally took that off the door, I would say, maybe during COVID. We started making a product. Now, the front, when you walk into the space that we're in right now, it doesn't feel like a retail space because I hate the way those coolers look, the rounded thing you normally see at like Publix or normal bakeries. I just hate the way they look, and I'm such a person that's like driven by aesthetics. So I could never find a way to have it work in that space. So we started keeping stuff in the back, and then we just did like a retail menu on the counter. So now we invite people in. The new space, which I bought our first building 3 years ago, has been under construction that long. It's finally going to be ready probably the end of the month and next month.
Oh, that's so exciting.
And that one will be a very like Emily in Paris vibe. So like in the front when you walk in, very French style, very small, but it now finally has a retail counter that feels like it. But it will also have like a place to plug in, have a coffee, and just really have bodies in there, because I miss having just the community come by, or someone come by with their kid and get a cupcake, or even an entrepreneur that's starting off just sitting there all day and all they do is buy like 2 cups of coffee. I'm fine with that because I love having people around, and those people tend to be the ones that inspire me the most.
Yeah.
And also just drive our business.
I'll have to come work there because I work out of my house because I don't have production.
Yeah.
You know?
It also gets you out of that headspace of being at home.
I go sit at Starbucks all the time, or Panera or something, and so I'm gonna come sit at your place.
Yeah, and we're gonna have a meeting room that is like tone on tone, beautiful, dusty pink. It looks like a really beautiful, well put together luxury dining room. And it's meant so that like creatives can rent the space by the hour too, or by the day. Awesome. So that you're not having a meeting at Starbucks. And, we're going to offer like cookies and water. And so we're just, I really thought about the space in a way that was more collaborative, aside from what we just need.
That's awesome. That is so.
I'm really excited about
that's
that
really
space.
Great. Where is the new location going to be?
It is literally like 2 minutes down the road from where we're at. So still on Dixie Highway, just south of Forest Hill, so in Soso.
Okay.
Which is a huge neighborhood up there and very well known.
Congratulations on that. Thank you. That's very exciting. I didn't even know that you had the new space coming. So that's really, really exciting. Okay, so we touched on it for a second. You do cupcakes.
Yes.
I know you through wedding cakes.
Yes. What else do we do?
Yeah.
I mean, we do a lot.
Like
we do cookies, brownies. We do shooters, which are like dessert cups. We've done croquembouche towers, macaroon towers. We've done carved cakes. We've put cakes, we send them to the Bahamas on yacht or private charters. I mean,
if it's a cake or dessert, if it's dessert, you do it.
I know how to ship it or put it somewhere. Yeah, as long as the client has the budget, obviously.
That's a good thing to talk about. Do you ship?
We used to ship our cake nosh, and then no matter how many perishable, fragile stickers you put in a box. I actually did a video, and I think I posted it on Instagram recently, but I did the video like a year ago, and my daughter was very savvy. She put like these funny like meme videos where it's like, a FedEx driver like throwing the package or kicking it. And that's the reason we don't ship anymore. But what we are going to start shipping again is like we do our cake mix. So then you get a link and it shows you like our secret frosting recipe so that people can bake our cakes at home from anywhere. And then now I'm working on a line that I just developed. So now it's it's going into like the branding facet of it, of like how to package it and stuff like that, where it's like sugar-free, dairy-free, and gluten-free. And they're really, really delicious, super healthy, clean, like eating cakes. So I'm really excited about that. But that's will be something that we'll ship as well. And then accessories. So we're just like something we removed, we're adding back in because logistically we needed to figure out how to do it safely and make sure that the product's going to get there. So it's limited on what we do, like our Rice Krispie slabs, which are these big bars of Rice Krispies or different Fruity Pebbles, all kinds of cereal. Those are shippable. So we're finally going to make a section that like tells you like, hey, here's where your shippable items are.
This is what can be shipped and then this is what's not. Aside from shipping, how about delivery? How far will you go delivery?
Well, we cover Vero to Key Largo, which is a really, really long...
all South Florida,
basically. I mean, pretty much all of South Florida. And I mean...
Vero's even semi-central Florida.
Yeah, and we've done Ocala.
That's definitely North Florida.
Naples is fine. And like I said, I mean, sending something to like the Bahamas requires a little bit of extra like work on planning. We are going to ask a lot of questions about logistics and temperament of like where the product's going to sit. Well, obviously we're talking about a client that has that kind of funding. Okay. So, when we do a cake to the Bahamas, it depends if they're going to do a sheet cake, a faux cake, a cutout. Most of these people are taking private charters and yachts. And so we just go through the process of like, every step that cake is going to go on, like whether it be a dolly or a golf cart or whatever. So we're going to ask a lot of questions before we get into like options of how we're going to produce the product. Years ago, I did a wedding in the Bahamas where we were hired for 3 days. So they rented us a house. I took a lot of stuff that I could pre-baked from here. And then I had a list of ingredients that I needed ordered and transported to the Bahamas. So again, a client that has that kind of money. Yeah. Basically. But
gotcha. I know it's funny with weddings or anything in life, anything's possible if you want to pay for it.
Yeah, that's pretty much that's really like how it happens. Like,
it's like one bride,
sure,
like, can we do this? I'm like, yeah,
if you can afford it, we can do anything.
If you want to pay for it. That's amazing though. I mean, that it's spread so much that even outside of Florida it's spread so much. That's amazing. So tell me about like, actually, you just mentioned something that I want to talk to you about, faux cakes. Do you do a lot of faux? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, when I first started, I was like, I'm not doing a fake cake. That is weird. And, now we do so many of them. I think along the lines when you learn, what I always tell our clients and wedding planners, because sometimes I never even meet the client. And sometimes we never even meet the wedding planner. They just like email us and they're like, here's a budget. Here's what they want. Come up with a design. Invoice me. Cool. That's like always going to be our best work. But when we talk about design in regards to faux cakes, we have an incredibly beautiful finish on buttercream. So while it would be an upsell financially to get someone to do fondant, there's like this big discrepancy between faux and buttercream and then fondant. Like people say fondant lasts longer. I'm going to be that trailblazer that says to stop saying that, because under fondant is buttercream if it's a real cake. So it's going to do the exact same thing. It's just a matter of time. But when it comes to faux cakes, whenever we do like sugar flowers, or if a cake is going to take 25 to 30 hours of labor on the outside, that is going to be something that we are going to drive that message. It has to be faux, because we want to be able to work with the cake. Things can be beautiful, but they also have to be delicious. And I hate when I hear, the cake was beautiful, but it tasted terrible. That's the last thing your guests are eating most of the time. Unless you have like a late night bite, that is the last thing they're eating. It's their last impression of food. So it's really important for us to provide, the space for the product to do what it needs to do. But it's not just in our space. I'm also going to think about the entirety of a 9 to 10 hour time frame in which it's sitting out, whether it be outside or inside, it doesn't matter. So I have to think about what is that product going to do when it leaves here for the entirety of the evening. And so that's how we come to determination whether we're going to do faux. Because if someone wants to just add a faux layer to a buttercream cake, I will not do it. It has to be fondant. Even if that layer is just fondant, because buttercream will slide off. We are in Florida. There's a ton of humidity, no matter how controlled our vans are. And when it gets to the site, I don't want someone calling me at 9 o'clock at night that something's happening. So we are going to always do what's right for the product. And then we have to talk to the client about it.
Gotcha. That really interests me as a planner.
And it's not cheaper, because people are like, well, if I want a fake cake, it's cheaper. When you're having like a 200-person wedding, cake is cheap at that point, because at that point, I'm going to tell you, like, I'm going to bake it either way, whether it's in a sheet cake. It's just, I'm not going to stack it. That's where that cost and, and material and labor comes in. But now I have a faux cake which I have to put a hole through with like a thermal machine that I have to put, so that we can support the dowel in between. But now I have to roll fondant, knead it, cover it, trim it, and smooth it out. So really, that's not necessarily cheaper. It's going to come down to design. Design is going to be the biggest dictator in cost, aside from like the amount of portions you need. So it's a faulty, message to say that faux cakes are going to be cheaper than real cakes.
It's like amazing to me hearing you say that like you started just walking the mall with your daughter and making cupcakes and and now this is like totally, it's like your first language is speaking all of this cake design and all of this stuff.
I spent a lot of late night at weddings of my own free will because I wanted to understand what wedding planners go through, what the venue and the vendor load-in look like, how does it function, how does my cake sit in there, and then I wanted to understand the entire way that a catering service happens in the timeline and how they cut cakes. And I did that for many years with different caterers that would allow me to do that so that I understood what I was selling, because at the end of the day, when a cake is at Vizcaya, not every guest knows it's earth and sugar. Most of them don't. They're only going to know it's the catering trucks whose name is on there. So we are an extension of that company the minute that we're selling something to a client. And it's very important that from start to finish, we are doing the right thing for the wedding planner, for the caterer, for everyone else that has to play a hand in that. Yeah. Because we're at the end of service usually. Yeah.
No, it's true. It's very true. And I mean, the cakes I've had from you have been amazing and looked beautiful all night long. I've only had like real cakes from you. Yeah. But so tell me about the process of if there's a bride listening and they are interested in working with your company. What's the process? Should they email you? Should they come in person? What do you prefer? How do you like it?
I mean, I think, with social media, that's always going to be a caveat because people DM us all the time. And what I'd love to say, we're paying attention to messages. If you get enough of them, that's really hard to do. So now like our office team will go in and they'll just have like a, pre-written kind of like, here's what we need from you. If you could email us or give me your email. Now we've started adding in like, give me your contact so that we can at least start an email. It's impossible to try and have a full transaction over a DM. But most of the time they do the contact us page, or we have like a more complicated book a consult form. It's on Typeform. So it just kind of automates you to the next section based on what it is that you're actually inquiring about. We don't really ever have to meet a client on our end. That's not necessary. But the client usually wants to have a tasting. I mean, we deliver tastings. We have Zoom calls. We have in person. We have all kinds of ways to do meetings. But no, not necessarily. A client doesn't have to come in. Sometimes they're busy. If there's a trust there and you want to just pick a flavor and send me a design, we can do everything over email. I never have to meet someone sometimes because they're very trusting of their planner or the company that they're working with. Most importantly, and it's always a pain point question for any client, whether they have a big budget or small budget, we always need a budget because we're going to work backwards from there. If you go and design a wedding, it's going to be the same thing for a cake. If you start here and you got all these ins and outs, and then someone's like, how do I shave off $5,000? That could be so many variables. And it's the same thing with wedding cakes. Like, I don't want to start here and end up here based on a cost, like chopping away at it, because you can't necessarily chop at it that way. Yeah. So budget for us is numero uno.
I learned this the hard way, actually, like at my own wedding, not for cakes, but for the florist. And I sat there, excited, giddy bride, and they walked me through like with the TV presentation, and they were a fabulous company. Like, I don't want to knock them, but they sat there and showed me all of this grand stuff that they can do. And I had told them like a budget before. So I kind of thought what they were explaining to me was
within that budget.
Yeah. It was 3 times the budget. Wow. And I just was like, oh, okay.
Can I even work with you for this client?
Now I have to like, okay, remove that. And like, it was fine. I still had like, my wedding, I cannot complain. Like, I had everything I wanted, but like, no, it's good to have a realistic budget in the front end for all of the vendors in a wedding planning, and the cake included, and so that you can give them a realistic idea of like, this is what we can do within your budget.
Now, if you want to go higher, great, then we can give you more options. But you could send me like 3 cake pictures, especially for like birthdays. If somebody will send us 3 pictures, and like, this is really simple. It might look simple to someone, but the technique for us to get there labor-wise might actually be longer than me just covering it in like, frames and painting it gold and to get a perfect, cut piece of fondant on a square cake and like, make borders on everything. That is going to take 10 times longer than it's going to take me to just like mold something out and paint it. It still takes long, but it doesn't translate visually to something that would take longer. So for us, we work backwards. We want a budget, want some inspo images, and how many people. Those are the three main things that we need to know so that we can kind of work backwards. Either we tell you like you're at a base buttercream, and that's before I even add anything. So do you have any extra room? Because if you don't, this is all I can sell you. And then if they give us some pictures, I kind of start looking at like what's in those pictures. And we're like, okay, labor wise, this person has to be at like 4 hours, or this is a great budget. We can do 30 hours and these are the pictures. So like, let's start picking what we can offer it, and then we come up with a design. But without that, it's impossible, because we're just, I mean, you could spend $1,000 on a 1-tier cake for 20 people. And we've had clients that do that, especially like Miami clients, because they want something fully hand painted. Every figurine has to be made of sugar, and they're like, sure, I want that. But then there's people like, I'm not going to spend that for a 3-year-old. And, you know, so it's like, respectfully, we want every client from the smallest to the biggest, and we treat them all exactly the same. But without that number, it's a near impossible ask.
Yeah. What if people don't even know where to start with, like, what a realistic budget is? Do you give them some like examples?
Yeah, so like our pricing per person for buttercream, that's like our base. Like here, like okay. I can do stripes, I can do waves, I can do white smooth. This is where you're starting at. What else do you got? Because that's like our starting basic, and it's going to be a 1-tier or 2-tier. I mean, that's just the starting price. The starting base for us is always going to be just buttercream.
Gotcha.
Nothing on it.
So we talked about it a little bit before, but I had on my list of things to talk to you about, just like, how should the cake be displayed? If just for brides listening, because like with this podcast, The Wedding Buzz, I love to like talk to vendors and hear about their businesses, but then also like try to, you know, pull info out of all of my guests on like, how can we help brides? Because my heart really goes towards brides, and I feel like the wedding planning process can be so stressful. There's so much pressure, and it's like everyone's like, oh, don't stress, like have fun with it. But then if anything goes wrong, they're judging the bride.
Well, it's also a lot of small details, and then they're like, I didn't have this in my wedding picture when I was cutting my cake, you know. And it's like, you know, there's a lot of little things, you know, for me when I meet with clients, like, because we obviously work with a lot of hotels that include us in their packages, which is great. But even for that client, if they're doing 0 upgrades and they're just taking something that's included, again, I'm going to ask the same question. Like, do you want your cake sitting on a linen, which is fine, or do you want it separated by a stand or a riser, which is like those pretty like antique plates and things like that? Like, is that the look you want? Do you want to repurpose any of your, I know the florists are going to kill me for that. Do you want to repurpose any of your bridesmaids bouquets and lay them down flat? Now you have like a whole floral bed that you can go depending on how many bridesmaids you have, or like, how do you want that cake table to feel? And we normally will always at least tell them that, so that the expectation isn't like, I just got a cake that sat here and it's on my linen and there's no flowers on it. Why didn't you do the flowers on it? We cover all that in the tasting console. And some cake decorators will say like, I can't believe you guys don't do the flowers on the cake. And there's like this whole like, you know, behind our backs kind of like criticism. You know, when I was doing 6 wedding cakes a week, sure, I could pick up all the flowers from all the vendors and put the cakes on it. When we are doing 60 wedding cakes a week, we cannot do that. That's not feasible. Also, some of those flowers
Is that how many you're doing?
Yeah.
Like 60 a week?
Yeah, during season.
That's a lot.
So we can't pick up all those flowers. Also, some of those flowers would die. And then we're left with asking the florist to give us more of their product than what they've already accounted for. So now we defer to the florist to place the flowers on the cake. But during the consult, we'll tell them, hey, talk to your florist. Give them a picture for reference where they're going to go with your flowers so it matches your decor, because there are so many variations to a white rose. Even if I buy it for you, it might not be the one they're using in your arrangement. So it's realistically like, are you really thinking about the full vendor picture by saying, I'll add the flowers to the cake? You know, the other thing that, you know, that is a pet peeve of mine is like, you know, with florists and with clients, we don't ever tell the client that the florist will, I'll outright just include flowers. We always say, talk to your florist. You have a contract with them. See if they've included cake flowers. If not, have that conversation the next time you go for your final sample meeting and see what they say. If they aren't comfortable placing the flowers on the cake, no problem. We will facilitate that they drop those flowers off to us, or we can do a pickup for a small fee, and we will wire them in or place them in. And it's a nominal fee. It's usually $25 to $50, unless it's like a huge cascade. At that point, we're talking a different cost. But we'll still tell the florist, like, hey, I need 3 dozen of this, 2 dozen of this, 2 stems of ruscus. Like, I know exactly what I need once they give me a floral list, and we'll go through that whole process to make sure that the vendor is also represented in their floristry. But we will not just do it for everyone, because it's, you know, again, things die or they don't look well, or, you know, we give them like a guideline.
It makes total sense. And you're right. Like, a white rose can look totally different depending on where you get it. And so it does make the most sense if the florist, bring some extra flowers,
Yeah.
but that's great that you're willing to work with the florists and
Absolutely.
communicate prior and work as a team. I do know that I've had before where the florists are like, here's the flowers for the cake.
I'm not touching that cake.
And I'm like, I don't want to touch it. Like, so do you guys, will you like?
So our drivers have some training to put flowers on, but are they going to be like what I would do or someone else on my team would do? No. So again, we already went through that in the consult process. We don't like anyone leaving a consultation, whether it be virtual, in an email, or in person, without feeling like we've talked about everything to cover the cake and the cake table, so that they can make the decisions moving forward, what they would like to do, what they're willing to expense if those things aren't options. Like we go through all that because we feel like it's fair for the client to get a full picture before they leave. It's really hard to give someone a full picture through emails.
Yeah.
So if it's in person, preferably we're handling all that in person so they can ask those questions.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Well, is there anything else like that you really specialize or that you like want to share about your business? I know I kind of put you on the spot here.
There's so many things that we do. I think, for me, I've had some time to sit down with some friends, and I really wanted to stress having a platform to help each other out. And it really comes down to client education. Even if we can't work with a client, it is our responsibility to price fairly within what we do. If a bakery is charging, $150 for something that I charge 3 times that, it's still fair to educate the consumer. I am probably not paying my pastry chefs. They're probably not paying their pastry chefs what I pay my pastry chefs. They also probably don't have 2 trucks with insurance and a ton of overhead, or 8 other insurance policies for general liability, workers' comp, and all this other stuff, because they're not built that way. And so there's an investment cost with any vendor, including ourselves, that is not necessarily at something tangible that you can hold in your hands, but it is something that adds value. And we as vendors want to continue to educate the consumer, because that only helps us. With us, we have a pastry team on call, we have a manager on call every weekend, we have a designer on call every weekend. So whether if it's our fault of our own or someone else's fault, we have the financial capability of sending someone out, even if it's in Miami, at a whim, or bringing a cake back and then sending another driver back, or someone forgot to order a cake and now I've got to let you borrow a faux cake, and I'm going to call back a pastry team, and then I'm going to redeliver a sheet cake when it's being cut at 9 p.m. I have the way to facilitate that, but that means I have the team to do that. And there is a value point in that. And those are hidden values, but they are values. And also, if something happens on the road, which it's happened to us, where someone cut us off and van had to push stop, and 5 5-tier wedding cakes go over and go splat. Do we have the resources to do it, to fix it in Miami, because we're going to call in some friends and borrow a kitchen? Do we have the personnel to fix it? If you're having a 1-man show or a 2-person show with that kind of product, what's the likelihood they're going to be able to do that?
Yeah, that's
highly unlikely.
No, I mean, for myself, I've said that like the hardest part of starting my wedding planning business is like the business side of it and learning all that and just getting started. The actual wedding planning for me is so fun. Like, and I used to work for someone else, so I have the experience.
Right.
So for you, it's like, at this point, you're probably like, making the cake is the easy part.
It's everything else.
Running the business. But it's so true. I mean, it's your brand is known in this area, and it's known for a reason. And I can definitely say that not all other vendors that I've worked with, like, you can trust on that level. Like, they don't all have the backup, and like, no hate on them. I'm sure when you first started, you didn't either, but like, you've come a long way, and of course your cakes are going to be priced at a certain
And listen,
level.
As a business, every single one of us come into this saying, I'm always going to be 120%. That is the exact goal every day that all of us go into work with. But it would be a lie to say that you can do that every single day, 15 years straight. You are going to run into issues, whether it be our fault or whether it be the fault of someone else that said, hey, is that a real cake? Boom, poke a finger in an elevator, and now we've got to fix it at my expense. But at the same token, those kind of experiences are what make us who we are. Mm-hmm. And so when people ask us, have you ever dropped a cake? I shockingly, because I could always see it in their faces, say yes, we have. But that's why they're structured the way they are now.
Yeah.
Like, I can guarantee that nothing is going to happen. They're not going to come apart from each other if they're outside in the heat for 9 hours. You know, like, I always use that because honesty is the best policy. And even when things are going wrong, honesty is still going to be the best policy. And I always tell my team that, like, I can't help you put out a fire or help you help us if I'm not telling you exactly what we're looking at. Yeah. So good or bad, we have to be always
is what
be
it
honest.
is.
Yeah.
So I ask everyone that's on the podcast, which we're kind of touching on it right now, but do you have any wedding horror stories?
You know, before I left the office today, Allison, she's been with me 7.5 years. I love her to death. She has so many. And then Lori, who's our CEO, was like, oh, well, which one are you going to share? And Allison's like, I know which one to share. I have them saved in my favorites. It's that one that I just briefly touched on. And it was that she was with my niece at the time driving a truck to Miami because we all do all jobs whenever needed. And she got cut off, and those wedding cakes were all real, all buttercream. It was an absolute nightmare. We have catering relationships, and this super high-end caterer in Wynwood allowed us to use their kitchen. So we landed there. She's like, my toes were covered in buttercream. We had to remove every cake from there. Anything that was salvageable and obviously still considered edible and safe and clean, we were able to salvage. Everything else we took from things we started baking already for the new week. And we took tubs of buttercream, some other things that we needed to fix it. And we went in there and we took them all apart. We fixed the things that we needed to fix, refilled, put them all together, and one by one, Allison and my niece would take them to venues all around Miami so that they would all get there by at least the time that they were going to be in that reception room. That is a miracle in itself. It took a lot of people and a lot of favors, but we got it done. And that would probably be my biggest nightmare because that was like...
I feel like...
So many.
Losing one cake like this
5 at a time was horrible.
A nightmare, but 5
at a time.
So do you have just like cake baked and ready to...
So because we're
like,
always...
how do you do this?
Because we're always baking in advance.
Yeah.
Because we're always getting orders in. At that point, I'm like, whose can I steal? Because I'm going to have to steal it right now. So we've learned our lesson to stop thinking that everything is like unicorns and magical stars. And just, we are always constantly baking so that we can have that. It's not like, hey, we've got a freezer cake for 4 months and that's what we're going to put on your cake. It's that we are constantly baking. And so we have some fail safes. And then again, if it's something we can't fix, we're gonna have to play the honesty card, and we're gonna be like, hey, I cannot fix this. That just happened. But I have 3 or 4 cakes in storage that are available. I can deliver that so that the table is not empty. I will re-deliver all the cakes that they need to have in a sheet cake form so that chef can cut it and have it out at a decent time and it doesn't ruin their timeline. It's just decisions you got to make at the time. And it's really expensive to fix mistakes like that. But I think the biggest thing as a company is to build something where you're solvent enough to be able to fix it. Yeah. Because you have to fix it, and you have to do right by the client, even if it's not a perfect situation. You know, we have to make it right, no matter what in the end.
Yeah. No, I mean it's true, and things in life are going to pop up, but it's just like, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to absolutely panic, or do you have a backup plan? Yeah. And make things happen?
The last thing I'm going to do is call that client who's got a really special day and be a pain in their rear end for like fixing something that I should know as an owner, and my team should know, like, we're in DEFCON 1, what are we doing?
Mm-hmm. Especially like weddings. Like weddings are such it's the one day.
Super high emotions.
It's not like a corporate meeting. Oh, we want a cake. Like it's wedding.
It's a one time.
You know, it's so funny. This is reminding me. My sister just had a baby. He turned 1 month, like 2 days ago. And on the way here,
congratulations, you're an
thank you. I know, I'm like the most obnoxious aunt ever. I'm like, my sister and I are super close, so I'm like, this is my baby. But
good practice.
I was talking to her on the way here, and he's like screaming, and she's like, I'm so tired. Anyway, it's just reminding me because the other day she was like, I cried over spilt milk. I pumped, and I spilled it, and I cried.
I used to lock myself in the closet with a screaming toddler because I was like, thank you for calling Earth and Sugar on my cell phone. And my toddler's like, and I'm like, oh my God. So as they got older, I just told my friend about this, but I was like, I learned how to be a business owner, not by watching cake people. I have a corporate background. And so for me, I was always like, I'm going to go learn about business and sales from people who do completely the opposite of what I do. That is how I learned how to be a good business owner, and I constantly educate myself. I went through a Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program, which was impossible. I went to school in Miami like almost every day during the week, like while running my business. And so you have to do that to better yourself.
Yeah.
But one of the things I learned was just from a sales thing, actually the Little Red Book of Sales, which was given to me when I was in a corporate job. Super boring book, super helpful. But I went and watched this person speak at a live seminar, and they would say, when you have children at home and you're building a business or you're working from home, like my husband does, you know, they would do the red cap method. And I'm like, what is that? And it was like, when mommy has the red cap on, it's pure silence. And then you get a treat. So as they were getting older, when I wasn't dropping them off at a Starbucks in a car seat so I could go deliver a box of cupcakes to one of my cousins, you know, like it was just this constant crazy life. But I would do the red cap, and I would say, hey, like,
did it work?
Most of the time, yes.
Most of the time,
but when it did it, I kid you not, I would lock myself in my closet, through my room, and like put the baby camera on, and I'm like, okay, I got like 30 seconds for this phone call, or like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's what you have to do. I mean, you can't grow if people think like you're a one-person show. And it wasn't lying. It was just like I knew what I was trying to build, and I needed to get the trust of the clients and the community to do that. And Red Cap was definitely something we did.
Yeah, I will keep that in mind. I don't have kids yet, but I want them in the next few years or so. And that's, I mean, part of why I was, because, you know, my backstory, I have my master's degree in project management, which I think is
that is great.
The best thing for wedding planning.
Huge.
It's my project management MBA. I'm like, that, I didn't need
you could use that in anything in this industry.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's really like, what are all the pieces to get the end goal done? I totally lost my train of thought.
No, we were talking about like how you manage phone calls. Look, I think that there's people out there who do really good things, and they're like, I can't talk to you between 4 and 6. That's not how I built my business. I haven't paid a single advertising fee in 15 years. We built it, everything on word of mouth. Obviously now we're at a different phase, so I'm sure that that's going to come into play now. But I didn't build it by having screaming kids in the background.
Yeah.
You have to look professional, and nothing says trust other than silence in your background.
That's what I was going to say, is that I want to be a mom one day, and I'm like, I was hating my corporate job, hating it, and being glued to someone else's schedule.
And I'm different. Look, there's people out there who think like she's crazy, selfish, and she's a workaholic, and that's fine because I know what I'm building for me and my family, and also for my employees. I have a different set of responsibilities and weight on my shoulders. You get to do it however you want. But this is the way I'm doing it, and ultimately, I was available to everybody 24 hours a day. I mean, if I had to wake up in the middle of the night, I would. And if I had to be at a venue because a cake was slightly slanting, not that it was going to fall apart because we structure them differently, but because they had it by the 20-person band, which I highly don't recommend, and then the speakers were going boom, boom, boom. I went and stood next to that cake. I got out of my PJs and I went there and I was like, I'm going to stand here just to make sure nothing happens. That is how we built this. Yeah.
Well, your hard work definitely seems to be paying off, more than paying off. It's the cakes I've had from you were not slanted, were not melted. They were. I actually had one of your cakes. The bride. It was for a bridal shower.
Yeah.
But she got COVID, and of course, you guys had already made the cake. You were like on your way to deliver it, and so we stuck it in the freezer.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, a month later when we unfroze that thing, like brand new. Like the mom of the bride was like freaking out, and I was like, I talked to your team, and they're like,
how to do it.
That's
my next question. I'm like, I hope my team, because we have a process for this.
You guys wrapped it up for us, and you guys delivered it to the house. Like I know they came outside like with their COVID mask, and it was like, take the cake and stick it in the freezer, and it was a whole thing. And the mom she was so nice, but of course she was like panicking, and she spent a lot of money for a bridal shower cake. And when we like took that bite, when it actually happened of the cake, she looked at me and was like, like, but thank God. But it was, I mean, it was fabulous.
Our recipes are meant to be tried and true. I mean, obviously, like at the beginning of any business, they weren't perfect, but when you start doing volume, you've got to find recipes. We still make everything from scratch, and that is in itself more expensive. So just starting off with that baseline, it's always going to cost more because we're making everything from scratch.
Yeah.
So
what is one piece of advice that you'd like to give to anyone? I mean, probably brides or anyone. Do you have
I mean, you know, for brides, I love them all. I think coming in with some expectations, like I mentioned before, you know, we would all love to drive incredibly beautiful Maseratis, but we can all not do that. So I think that coming in with an understanding that every bakery for us, and I don't even consider ourselves a bakery, I consider ourselves a studio. We are also a manufacturer because we have a wholesale side, but everybody has a way of doing things, and how they do them and what time and material costs go into that dictates what you're going to get in the end. So come with an open mind on cost comparison, because between me and another bakery, we may look the same from the outside, but we are not the same on the inside. Mm-hmm. And so there's not going to be a way for me to justify and come down, because it may be that I'd be giving away that cake. I'd actually be paying for you to take that cake from me. And so it's not, we don't price gouge. We look at our pricing every year, and we look at, you know, inflation. We look at what we're paying for things. We look at labor costs, because cost of living goes up. That means employee cost goes up, you know? And so these are normal things. And I always tell people, like, would you want to go to work, you know, for 10 years straight for any company, and you're going to go and say, I'm going to get paid the same amount every year? You wouldn't do that. And so we can't do it either. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, that all comes into like how we cost out our product. It is not just the cake. And so, you know, I'm a business who decided on building something, aside from building a good product and a good infrastructure to get that product there, not just like a pretty Instagram picture, you know, because it's an experience. It's a guest experience. But we also wanted to build a business that was responsible in the community. And that means that our employees are equally as important as that product. So, you know, you have to come with an open mind when you're coming to work with us, because we're not necessarily going to be the cheapest, but we are going to be the safest option. Yeah.
No, and you get what you pay for, and it's true. And let me tell you, like, if doing what you're doing is easy, everybody would do it, and everyone is not doing it. And I've tried to decorate a few cakes, and I'm going to let you do that.
Yeah. And we survived COVID, and not everyone can say that. That is true. And I looked at our team and I said that, I'm like, we did not close our doors, and that took a lot.
Yeah. No, I'm sure you
a lot of savings, a lot of right planning for many years, because that was not a hurricane. That was worse.
Yeah. Yeah. Us Floridians can survive hurricanes. Yeah. We're good.
I think I could have survived like 10 hurricanes in a row.
Right.
And 90 days of COVID could kill any business.
Yeah. I don't mean to downplay what just happened in Texas, because I know there was a hurricane.
Absolutely. And listen, we've been through hurricanes here.
But I did hear one person be like, it's coming in as a category 1. Like, this is terrible. And I was like, category 1?
Oh, listen, my husband is born and raised in Miami, lived through Andrew, literally lived through Andrew, roof, house blown away, you know, trying to survive in a bathtub. Like, I do not take it lightly, because I'm married to someone who had a real experience of a category 5. And, you know, like in our new building, everything is impact glass. We put in a special plug outside in our meter box, so that if we had product and all of a sudden it became like that serious situation, we can have generators running to protect the product, so that if people are having still events and we're halfway through that process, we protect the product. So like, I really do think of everything.
Of everything. You have to. That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks
I really
for having
appreciate
me.
it. I know you're so busy, and you have so much going on, so I really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk with me. But your business is awesome, so I'm glad that you came and shared it. I'm excited to post this.
I'm honored that you're sharing it. So
where can people find you? I mean, what's your website? And
our website is earthandsugar.com, spelled out. And then all of our social media is the same thing, at Earth and Sugar, all one word. So I promise I'm gonna do better at the social media thing. You know, we had a full-time marketing person that left us like a year, maybe actually 2 years ago at this point. But you know, we have a lot of hats going, you know, that are going on our heads right now. But we try and post as much as possible. And I know people are like, where is your face? You have not been on here. And I'm going to do my best to like come on there and just talk.
Social media is like a full-time job. I swear.
It is a full-time job.
It is. It's a lot. It is a lot.
But yeah, they can see all of our stuff on social media for sure. Websites, who updates those as often? That is like an anomaly. Like,
yeah, but your stuff looks amazing. Your stuff looks.
We try. We shoot everything ourselves, unless it's like a wedding picture. Like, we shoot everything in house. I personally edit all of our pictures. You know, like, it is not an easy task.
I need to send. That's a good reminder for me. I need to send you, because sometimes I get back like the full wedding album and I get your cakes in there.
Yeah, we have like a Dropbox we put all that stuff into, and then obviously it's just the time to like make those story templates and all that stuff like that. But, you know, I would say we update our Instagram more than anything. TikTok is like, it's my kids' generation. They're so good at it, and they do it in 20 seconds. Meanwhile, I could sit there for 2 hours and I'm struggling, you know, because when I started Instagram, we're that Instagram generation that was like the aesthetics. So we would like roll into colors with pictures and stuff like that. Now it's like, it just doesn't matter. Just put anything up there.
Post 5 times a day.
Yeah. I think something on TikTok was like, everything is content or something like that. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, you're right. Like my dog licking my shoe would be content. Like literally, it's so crazy. I'm here like, and I'm being paralyzed by like, is the hue right?
My eggs. Like, what?
Yeah. And I'm here paralyzed by like, okay, this picture needs more light, or there's too much shading on this side. And I get it, because my friend, I just had a meeting with 2 of my friends that are in this industry, and they're like, you're paralyzing yourself by trying to be this perfect brand all the time in every single facet. So I'm working on that. That's my goal this year.
It's really hard. I mean, it's really hard. I try to keep up.
And
with
when I
social
miss
media,
something, when somebody tags us in their wedding post, like on a story, and I miss it, I feel so bad because it's not intentional. I just probably missed it because we just didn't go in time.
I mean, social media is like a full-time job, and you have one of those already. So
yeah, like 5.
Yeah, like 5, and your mom. So
yeah.
Be easy on yourself. But anyway, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I really, really appreciate it.
So good.
Yeah, and guys, if you're listening, if you're in South Florida or Central Florida, check out Earth and Sugar. Even if you're not getting married, just go get a cake. Yeah. My husband gets cakes randomly because he just likes cake. So
Friday night going to a friend's house. We are there. There's like online products. You just click a size, flavor, and you check out. And those are our favorites because we get to be a part of your week.
There you go. All right, guys, go try out Earth and Sugar, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.